Worth. He was the next door neighbor of an acquaintance of Holly mine who works for Lockheed. Colonel Harrison was a co-pilot on the first atomic bomb test dropped in Bikini Atoll. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was a lifelong friend, as you can see here, of the from the wartime days till he died, of the McCain family, Senator McCain and Admiral McCain. He also served as a special assistant to Admiral McCain at a very top-level security position. He's one of the guys that was truly a secret keeper, and he did it even from his son until the day that he died. As it turns out, Colonel Harrison was outside the back of his apartment, slipped and fell and hurt his head to the point that it was a cerebral hemorrhage. They took him to the hospital, and he lingered for a while. And his son was in there with him just before his dad died, and he said, "Dad, I've got to know, were the aliens real?" Because this guy was here at Roswell, and a number of paper trails led to his plane ID for having ferried parts back to Fort Worth and over to Wright Pat. And he turned to his son and he said, "All I will say is that they were real." And he died a few minutes later. So, you have another witness, hearsay, but one of the kind that really counts because he was a very special fella. He flew the B-47s, the early Strategic Air Command, and he also commanded a B-52 Air Wing under Curtis LeMay in the SAC program after that. 509th there was the start of that. And there's his Distinguished Flying Cross. Now, this is Raymond F. Jones. Who's Raymond F. Jones? This Island Earth, one of the two probably classic Hollywood productions about alien invasions of Earth in the 50s, the other being The Forbidden Planet. Raymond Jones wrote this and 74 other stories. Raymond was a Mormon and an avid imagination, but he also ran in some very interesting circles. And so after he had started and finished this particular book, which became the movie, he wrote a short story called Noise Level for this magazine, 1952. I came across the story in 1977 in this reprint done in England. I'm going to tell you a short précis of this story because it's going to probably answer a number of things for you eventually. In the story that Raymond wrote, Noise Level, there's a meeting called in the Pentagon. The chiefs of staff all come to the meeting, and there's a president's representative there, and there's this big table. In the middle of the table, there's this plastic-wrapped bunch of burned junk. And it was sealed up, airtight, tied off anyway. And the president's aide tells the assembled scientists and professors who've been called in from all the United States and the generals, he said, "Look, I know you're not going to believe what we're about to tell you, but something extraordinary happened last week, and we need your help to solve the mystery." He said, "We have some of it on film. We were testing this young fellow's device. He's kind of a smart aleck, but we were testing it last week with him, and here's the film we took." And so they opened up the curtain, and the film starts. And you see this young, kind of red-haired, freckle-faced scientist-looking smart aleck, really a bright genius type. And he's got this little chest pack and a backpack and a little belt, and he's standing in front of some of the generals there in a football stadium. And he reaches down, he pushes a button, and he lifts up off the deck 2 or 3 feet and just stands there in the air. Nobody says a word in the office there in the Pentagon. They're thinking, wow, okay, so he's been lifted up a bit. Then he pushes another button, and he rotates sideways and lifts up about 40 feet and takes off, flies around the football field and comes back around for a low pass over the generals. Everybody ducks, and there's a puff of smoke. Quick explosion, he nosedives into the deck and dies, a ball of flame. The package on the table holds the remains of the guy's instrument, what's left after the fire melted everything together. They said, "Gentlemen, he died before he told us how he did it. This guy doesn't work for any government. He's just an individual. He doesn't have any university grants. He's just an individual, and he did this. Now, you've got to figure out how he did it. We've got his apartment, we've got his library, we've got his lab, we've got everything. You go and take his notes apart and figure out how he did this." Wow. Everybody runs over a big gaggle to this guy's apartment. They look through his library. He's got chemistry here, physics here, philosophy, ancient mysticism, everything. And he's got a lathe room and downstairs in the second floor area here. And then he's got over here, he's got biochemistry and all kinds of stuff. And they said, could one guy have read all of this? And they start looking through some of the volumes, and there's notes, annotations in the margin. Well, where are his other notes? Couldn't find them. Weeks and months passed as they puzzled over how he did it. And groups all over the United States, for like Martin Marietta and some of the other larger corporations, had scientists gathered together trying to figure out how did he do it. One guy was out fishing, one of the scientists, and he's throwing his line into the water. And as it hit, ripples went out, and there was this swirling vortex next to a rock. And he saw how the splashing water moved some twigs that came together, pulled in by the vortex and stuck together. He says, I've got it. I understand gravity now. They went running back, and a month later, they rang the guys at the Pentagon and said, we've done it. It's 30 feet in diameter, and it's about a foot thick, and it weighs 15 tons, and it only moves off the floor an inch, but we've got anti-gravity. Well, the Pentagon said, get your notes, get over here quick. Everybody is reassembled into the Pentagon in the same room. They show the film of the test to all the other guys who weren't there, and they say, wow, fantastic. The guy that called the meeting said, gentlemen, I want you to meet someone very special. Curtain opens, and out comes the red-headed scientist, the dead one. And they said, what is this? They said, well, he's an actor. He never existed as we told it to you. We had to remove the noise level from your mind to say that it is possible to get you to work on it. Now, I tell you this for a reason. Two streams of events have been following the UFO circumstance, the real alien or fallen one's chain, and the one where the noise level has been removed in certain scientists' minds to get them to develop this. We have developed anti-gravity. I was recruited way after they got it for the first time because I came up with a method of powering a saucer craft using an ionized air plasma, which I'll explain to you later. In that program, under Dr. Teller, I was sent down to Australia. And so I have been privy to things you would never see. You would never, ever see. And I'm going to show you some of those things as best I could recreate them today so that you'll understand that mankind has, on his own accord, done some of this. Now, before the alien card was played or begun in 1947, it was kicked around in Washington that in addition to removing the noise level, after World War II was over, there was going to have to be some sort of a plan devised to stop warfare. We could not afford, the human race could not afford another warfare with the technology at the stage it was. Any of you that have brothers and sisters, as children, you can remember when you were in your room fighting at night, probably, and your dad said, stop, or I'm coming in with the belt. That he meant business, yeah, probably, until you heard the knock at the door. And when the door ripped open and there was the 8-foot wide belt with meat cleavers on it and said, I'm going to kill you, you knew you were friends again. You and your brother or sister were friends. And, hey, Dad, no problem. We are that way. Russian, Chinese, American, Canadian. We are the fighting siblings, all humans. Well, majority of us anyway. To get us together long enough to try peace, to get along in harmony, it was reasoned that they could not coerce us from any philosophical or political point. They could not force us with a dictatorship. So they were going to fool us into thinking we were being invaded without knowing that we had aliens at the time. The best laid plans go astray. In 1947, there was a crash. And there were alien beings on that crash. Even though I wasn't there, I'm convinced from what I was shown inside the organization. Certainly there were some technologies, and probably still are some remaining, that we were not able to back engineer, but some very interesting things did surface. Noise level, yeah, we don't want that. Okay. Now, to help you understand gravity, I'm doing this for a reason. There have been people that have talked about anti-gravity, some magic thing and this kind of stuff, and it's a very simple thing in concept. But I'm going to use graphics and some animations and some films of some of the tests we've done to explain gravity to you. So you understand then how anti-gravity can be made and was made, and will not be surprised when you see this upon you shortly out in the open. There is a real severe deception in the works, not entirely mankind's doing. Remember me telling you about noise level, guy out fishing and seeing the vortex and the little spin and stuff. What we see here is just a simple water drop. But I've put this up to show you how when the water drops, it splashes out, makes a large radius first ring, then smaller ones out like that. And then the reflection of its splash pops up a ball in the air like that. Okay, big deal, you've seen that. Now, what happens next is you will see if you take one splash, it sets equally, almost equally spaced crowns out like this. These are inertial things formed by water pressing on itself to make little beadlets out here like one single drop would do. This happens usually on a flat surface instead of a deep amount of water. Now, for the astronomers in the crowd, what we see here is a splash which can represent the sun. Then there's the first orbit of some planet, and a second and a third. But if you're an astronomer, you notice that those rings, the radii of them, do not match our planets. You think, well, this couldn't be explaining gravity and orbits of planets. But it does. Because in space, you don't have an infinite pond where the ripples just go out and don't come back. Space has mass and resistance. It's like a very fine fluid that's so fine that atoms are made up of a lot of it. It's called ether space in James Clerk Maxwell's day last, or century before last, and we have returned to that understanding of the way the world works. When you take a bucket of paint, thick paint, and you put your paint stirrer on your drill and you stick it down in and spin it around, it will make circular waves go out and hit the edge of the paint bucket and then come back to your spinning paint stirrer, to the little rod. If you spin it at the right speed for that can, the wave will go out, reflect back in, just in time to be in phase with the next spin wave coming out from your spinning rod. This is called standing waves or harmonics. When that happens, then the spacing of the rings changes. And when it does, you can have a planet and a moon, like the Earth and the moon right there, following this particular orbit. Notice how there are bands of orbits. We have those in our own solar system, with the Jovian lighter density planets like Jupiter and Saturn, where they have a large mass hump like this. That would be out in this area here. Here, down in our zone, is a different set of rings, but they all follow what's called a hyperbolic or an exponential curve as far as their distance from the sun like this. It's a very nice curve. But it's a sum of two things, two waves. The sun is spinning at high speed, and it spins out a bunch of rings. They reflect from space itself because it's spinning so fast, the sun is. And the waves reflect back, and where they cross and add together forms an orbit. And a planet has to orbit in one of those or it breaks up. Like the asteroid belt used to be a planet, but now it's broken up and pieces of it are on the surface of Mars, a lot of red dust and a 600-mile diameter chunk of that, either a moon or the planet itself in that orbit, is broken up on the surface of Mars near the Cydonia area where people think there's a face, and that's a farce. Gravity can be determined with a telescope looking at distant star systems. How can you see gravity? Because scientists, astronomers have found that as a star spins, it's originally spherical, but as it spins, it starts to flatten at the poles. And this is called oblateness. It's not totally round, it's oblate flattening. When that happens, they measure the number of degrees of off-true circle that is, and they say, its gravitational constant is such and such because it is so flattened. The more it flattens, the higher the gravitational constant. What they're telling you is this: gravity has to have spin around some center or you don't have gravity. So you say, well, why is that? It's because gravity is not a one-way force. It's the result of two forces acting. You spin Worth. He was the next door neighbor of an acquaintance of Holly and mine, who works for Lockheed. Colonel Harrison was a co-pilot on the first atomic bomb test dropped in Bikini Atoll. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was a lifelong friend, as you can see here, of the from the wartime days till he died, of the McCain family, Senator McCain and Admiral McCain. He also served so you have another witness, hearsay, but one of the kind that really counts because he was a very special fella. He flew the B-47s, the early Strategic Air Command, and he also commanded a B-52 Air Wing under Curtis LeMay in the SAC program after that. 509th there was the start of that. As a special assistant to Admiral McCain at a very top-level security position. He's one of the guys that was truly a secret keeper, and he did it even from his son until the day that he died. As it turns out, Colonel Harrison was outside the back of his apartment, slipped and fell and hurt his head to the point that it was a cerebral hemorrhage. They took him to the hospital, and he lingered for a while, and his son was in there with him just before his dad died, and he said, "Dad, I've got to know, were the aliens real?" Because this guy was here at Roswell, and a number of paper trails led to his plane ID for having ferried parts back to Fort Worth and over to Wright Pat. And he turned to his son and he said, "All I will say is that they were real." And he died a few minutes later. And there's his Distinguished Flying Cross. Now, this is Raymond F. Jones. Who's Raymond F. Jones? This Island Earth, one of the two probably classic Hollywood productions about alien invasions of Earth in the 50s. The other being The Forbidden Planet. Raymond Jones wrote this and 74 other stories. Raymond was a Mormon, and